My name is Scott Stanfield, and this is the Modern Longevitarian. I'm super excited about this show today. I'm excited about all of them. This is episode 58. And so welcome if you're watching on the Spirituality Gone Wild Network, and welcome if you're watching on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been such a blessing for me over the years, connecting with all the people from around the world. I've been connecting with people in Australia and the Philippines and in Europe and obviously here in America. And today's guest is actually, we've been connected on LinkedIn for a long time. He's actually from Utah. I've been living in Utah. Today's the 16th anniversary since we bought our house here in Park City. So this is broadcasting from my home office in Park City, Utah. And I hope that the internet's catching up. I saw that that it was kind of choppy when I was playing the intro video. So if it's a little choppy, just give it a second and hang in there with us. So with the Spirituality Gone Wild Network, we're actually finishing up, putting the finishing touches on this book of secrets that is a secret from each one of the co-creators within the Spirituality Gone Wild Network, our top secret for life. Mine is find yourself and do you. And I think that does not ring truer than A, the Modern Longevitarian, but B, with our guest today, who is the Undercover Millennial, Clint Pulver. And so I'm excited to have him on the show. And before I get there, I want to read this quote. And in the intro was a quote from Simon Sinek, which I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek, and Start With Why, Leaders Eat Last, and also his Infinite and Finite Games book, which is when you start thinking about life and you think about longevity, you think about these things, that the game will go on. Players will fall in and out, but in an infinite game, the game will go on. Life will go on. Business will go on, but players fall in and out. But this quote is from Frank Martin. And at the time he was, and he still may be, I don't really keep up with anymore, but I went to the University of South Carolina. He's a head basketball coach for the Gamecocks. And this is what he said. And I've saved this image for, it's got to be at least 3 or 4 years. He goes, you know what makes me sick to my stomach? When I hear grown people say that kids have changed. Kids haven't changed. Kids don't know anything about anything. We've changed as adults. We demand less of kids. We expect less of kids. We make their lives easier. Instead of preparing them for what life is truly about, we're the ones that have changed. Now, in my almost 30 years in the restaurant industry, when I hire somebody with no experience, I take on the responsibility to lead them. I've got to teach them from the ground up how to request for a day off, how scheduling works, where the schedule is posted on the wall. And I got to understand they're going to have questions. And if they're still in high school, I learned this when my son got a job, which was like, it was basically as his mother was still controlling his schedule and all those type of things. So it's a super important to understand the difference between generations, but also as a leader, no matter which generation you are, which I'm an Xer, right? Is that there's going to be differences, but it's our responsibility to lead them as best as we possibly can and accept them for where their starting point is. Now, with any further ado, I'm going to go on and bring on Clint and welcome him to the show. So Clint, welcome to the Modern Longevitarian.
What's up, Scott? It's good to be here, man. Thanks for letting me be a part of the show.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure having you. And you know what? It's snowing up here. We got about 6 inches last night. I don't know what it's looking like where you're at in Utah.
Man, I wish it was snowing down here. And down in the valley, we never get as much as you guys get up in the hills. So I wish. It's like one thing to have it so cold during the wintertime and not have it be beautiful because there's no snow. So I'm always a little envious of people that live up higher because, yeah, it's cold, but at least it's beautiful, right? You've got snow. So right. I'm hoping for some snow still this year that we get later in the season. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's been a weird year for snow. We haven't gotten a lot. So 6 inches is like, it sounds a lot to other people who may live in space, areas that don't get a lot of snow, but we're used to, waking up to a foot and 18 inches. And, or I remember April about, I don't know, it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago. It was late April, spring break. My parents are here and we got 48 inches in like 48 hours. It's some crazy number, right? It was so crazy.
Yeah. I can't even remember the last time we had that much snow. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm getting older, but I remember the good old days looking back when I was younger and so much snow and we're out there shoveling for hours. And man, I can't remember a winter where we've had that kind of snow. It's kind of weird. It seems like every year we're getting less and less, but
yeah, it seems that way. So what do you think about the quote I read from Frank Martin?
I love it. I think it's important. I think it's, I don't know. I am a big fan of get rid of the stereotypes.
Mhm.
Like focus on people. People are people. And I think, at least that I've seen in all of the undercover work, is when people start to label a generation, or you label young people as millennials or Zoomers or Gen Z, or you label someone as a boomer, right? We look at that stereotype, and there's certain stigmas with those stereotypes, whether we like
Right.
it or not. And I think the moment that we can lose that and focus on people, like I love what he said, that kids are kids, right? People are people. Now, the world they grow up in changes all the time. And we are
Right.
in a different time than it was 20 years ago. However, core intrinsic needs, human values, universal principles apply to any generation. It's just
Mhm.
a matter of connection and tapping into that. I love that quote.
Yeah, I do too. That's why I saved it. I mean, I took the screenshot of it. And I've used it over the years just to help ground me in understanding, like literally. And I was telling you before we went live, I have, like, in the same breath, in the same moment, we're leading people who were 16 years old and people who were 59 years old. So from every generation that is imaginable in between, we had to lead those people, and it's a challenge, right?
Hmm.
And because sometimes the older people have given the labels to these younger people, and like these kids just don't get it. But
That's right.
here's a funny story, right? It's like, the baby boomers, gave birth to the Generation X. I heard them talking negatively about my generation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like this is nothing new to talk about millennials or any of those type of things. I remember my dad worked for a trunking company for 32 years, and they had a newsletter that came out, a physical newsletter. It wasn't like an e thing, right? I was like just starting to manage restaurants, and it said something like a college graduate today. And this was years ago. This is back in the 90s. Said a college graduate today has no memory of life. Not a college graduate, but because I was graduating college. So it's something like, it was something like a 12-year-old kid has no memory of life without MTV, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm sure you have no memory of life without MTV, right? Where I remember when I was in high school, it was like day one, Bon Jovi was on, right?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like day one of MTV, and we were all talking about it in high school. So it's
Yep.
really an interesting, piece where this changes over time. And talking about times changing, I read this years ago, and I'll get back, and I got so many questions for you because, I employee retention and hiring the right people and keeping them and building teams is such a big piece of what I've done over the years to be super successful. But my point is, that the amount of change that happened in the world from the time Christopher Columbus landed in the New World to 1972, and I probably remember this because I was born in 72, that 500 years, right? Space, right? The same amount of change was going to happen on the globe from 72 to 2022, which is next year. And I'll be 50. That 50 years is the same amount of change that was in 500 years previous, right? And so, like when you look at generational environments and cultures changing and influence on that, it has to make them a different. They see the world differently because the world is changing so rapidly in comparison to the previous 500 years. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, we have to respect that. We have to be astute to that and realize that, yes, the world is changing, right? Adapt or die, technology, the advancements, what that does to how we think, how we operate, how we manage, it matters, but people are still people. One of the biggest things that I hate is when a leader kind of tries to do this one size fits all approach, or they think that there's like a millennial hack. Like if you work with millennials, if you manage millennials, then you need to treat them this way. You need to be this certain way. And that
Right.
boggles my mind that based off of a time period when someone was born, you put them in a box and you create this package that you operate and work from. I hate personality tests. I'm not a big fan of personality. We had one organization where the Hartman color code was like
Mhm.
the pristine, it was the Bible of the organization. Like if you got hired, you went through orientation and you got a color. And obviously it starts out with good intentions, right? We do a personality test to try to learn about somebody or to learn about what motivates them or what moves you intrinsically. But what can happen is misdiagnosis.
Yes.
What can happen is a false label that we put people in a box with. And what happened when I went undercover into this organization, we found that so many people were viewing themselves as a color. And then when they would go up to a coworker, or they'd meet somebody at work, the first thing they would ask is, what color are you?
Mm.
And
Wow.
people are not colors. They're not. We are not. We are living, breathing entities. There is no one size fits all. Everybody's grown up with a different background, different perspective, different upbringing, a different view in life. Therefore, there is no one size fits all. It always has to get about specific people, connections, one-on-one relationships. Yeah, the moment we start putting a box and a label on things, I think is the moment that we start to fail within our leadership.
I couldn't agree with you more, right? Because, when you, like I said, over the years, like, I think of, I think of even the last job when I was in Santa Monica, there was, an older gentleman that we get frustrated with. He's like, these younger kids don't show up on time. They don't do this, they don't do that. And it's
Yep.
just, it's just their generation. He would put them in the box. And, where, like even from the book, Leadership and Self-Deception, when there's a gap created, step in with trust,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I just understand everybody has a different starting point. Everybody's there, but psychology is psychology, right? I mean, the human being is the human being. Like and I love what you say. And I even take the same approach to someone's health with my coaching clients and those things. Is that we're all individuals.
That's right.
One example that I use is that your gut microbiome is different than mine. And
That's right.
there's multiple reasons why it's so individual,
Yep.
right? And that may be one is that the download you got from your mom is different than the download I got from my mom, right?
Yep.
I was born C-section. I didn't get the full download. I got some of it then when she breastfed me. So I didn't get it all, right? And so what happens is, and then I've fed my microbiome based off the food my parents gave me, right? Same thing with you. You fed yours, and yours is probably different than mine. I grew up in South Carolina, had a southern version of the standard American diet, which means everything was fried. And if it wasn't fried, it was double battered and fried. I mean, it
Yep.
was like those type
Yep.
of things. But
Yep.
if you've taken any antibiotics in your life, like I have, right? But it's not been the exact same prescriptions, exact same thing, those things. So just as we're different on the inside and like in our gut microbiome, we're different people, like you said, with different belief, different upbringings, different things. And so, man, you're right on time. I totally, this is going to be such a great episode. I'm excited.
Yeah, I just and it's unfortunate because putting somebody in a box or using the personality assessment or trying to the quick hack to leadership and to understanding your people, using those methods is quick, it's fast, and when you've got someone who's managing a lot of people, they're looking to constantly stay productive. But the reality, and I've seen it time and time again, it takes time. It takes connection. It takes the hard stuff. There is no shortcut. When I was in flight school, we would every plane had a manual,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and the manual would tell you when to take off, what speed to land at. It would tell you, what angle the airplane would stall at. It had all, and every type of aircraft that was the same build had the same manual.
Right.
Every pilot knew that when you got in the same type of aircraft, different planes flew differently.
Mm-hmm.
You could refer to the manual, right? Personality assessments, the color code, whatever it is, they can be good tools. I'm not saying that you don't use those, but nothing will ever substitute for sitting in the plane and flying it. Nothing will substitute for spending time, for building connection, for learning how do we make this work for you? It's just like a nutrition plan, right? We're going to make it work for you because you are an individual. You're not a color. You're not a generational stereotype. You are a person.
Right.
And we need to lead the person.
Right. So have you heard of DISC, D-I-S-C?
Yeah.
Type of test?
Yep.
The last job I had, and when I was interviewed for a long time for this job, and the one in Santa Monica, and then they had me. Then I get an email saying I need to take this disc, and I was like, and I'm such a counterintuitive, like Simon Sinek, like leaders eat last, create a start with empathy. I'm like, I'm never getting hired, right? I did every time I take a personality test, I just don't get hired because I don't score what they're looking for on this, where someone who's high in discipline, right? And I scored super high on C, right? So I'm an analyzing coordinator is what my thing was. But the intuitive thing is that the regional director said, he goes, you've been a GM and director of food and beverage for all of these years, and you've held your jobs for a long time and had tons of success. I know somewhere hidden in there had to be some D. There had to be some discipline inside of you, and you were holding people accountable on that, even though you didn't score it. So I
Mm-hmm.
love the way that Jeff used that tool to be able to like go and be intuitive and go it and look at my resume and go, even though Scott scored as a high analyzing coordinator, which I want that on the team, right? There has to be some other hidden things that are not coming out in this test, right?
Yep.
So there's things like that people can use it as a tool like that versus just like, oh, we didn't have, this is not gonna work because he didn't score the matrix we wanted, and we're gonna move on to the next candidate.
Yep. Use it as a tool, not as a diagnosis.
Right.
I think that's the point there for sure.
Right. When you start looking at my upbringing and things like that, my dad was in the military, he was strict, those type of things. There's definitely some, discipline, in my makeup because I was raised that way. So therefore I lead people or manage people before I ever became a leader, really, in that type of way. So before I want to transition, I want to know where the Undercover Millennial title came from and what this is and how you got started in this.
Yeah, 5 years ago, I went with a mastermind group of other CEOs, executives, business owners to New York. It was a really cool trip where we got to meet other business leaders, people that were killing it in the industries. It was related to business, retail, food and beverage. And one of the guys that we met with had a large retail athletic store. And we walked in, it was beautiful. We met with the guy. We had great conversations. We learned about how he needed to adapt. He needed to change how he managed, the demands of an ever-changing marketplace. He talked about how we're on Amazon now. We do Instagram ads. We're constantly having to adapt to meet the demands of an evolving economy. And I said, I 100% agree with you. And I remember asking, what about your management style? Here was a CEO had done it for a long time, and I just simply said, have you changed how you manage people today versus how you manage people 20 years ago? And he fired back and he said, no. He said, I manage the same way that I managed 20 years ago. And I found it just a little bit fascinating. I had spent a long time with young people. I am a young person. I'm a millennial. At the time, I was maybe 4 years out of college, and again, had worked with a lot of young people. And I understand that people are people, but I understand also that the world's changed, and so we need to adapt. We need to pivot. We need to understand that world. We need to understand their perspective. And he felt no need to change. And so we thanked him for his time. We ended the conversation, and we had like 45 minutes till we needed to go to the next place. And we're in this sporting goods store, and he's like, you got time to kill? He gave us like 65% off. He's like, go buy some sports swag, get out of here. I was like, okay, cool. And I didn't want any swag. We had 45 minutes to kill, and I'm sitting in this store, and I look around, and all of his employees are my age or younger. And I had the quick thought, Scott, and I said, I wonder if his employees would say the same thing that he said. I wonder if the employees, their perspective would be this wonderful, extravagant, everything's amazing, kind of a thought. And so I said, I'm just going to ask one. And I was in my backwards hat. I had my Nikes on, I'm wearing joggers. I'm just literally a customer in the store. And I walked up to the first kid and I just said, hey, I'm just curious. Do you like working here? And it literally felt like I was doing an illegal drug exchange. He goes super quiet. He looks around and he goes, honestly, I hate it. I hate my job. And I remember going, okay. And then I just said, why? I said, I honestly want to know why. And if you hate it so much, why do you work here? And he goes, oh, I've already applied to 3 other places. Well, what are you talking about? He's like, honestly, like everybody, we just feel like we're numbers. Like we just sit, we're worker bees, we push the buttons. I feel like, upper management, nobody knows who I am. Nobody really cares. Like I've got plans, I've got things I want to do. But this is just a side gig. This is just something to get me to the next place. And I thought, okay, well, maybe the kid's having a bad day.
Right.
So I went and asked another one and another one and another one. At the end of the 45-minute conversation, I had interviewed 6 of this guy's employees. And 5 out of the 6 of his employees said they would not be working for this guy and his store in less than 3.5 months. All of them would be gone. And I listened to their story, Scott. I listened to what they said. I listened to the things that they talked about, or the things they wish they would have had. Even some of the things they wish that would be changed, or even the things that they loved. And I remember thinking, what if the CEO could hear this? Like how would he change his approach? Would he actually be a little better? Would he maybe create something that would keep the employees around a little longer? Would he maybe listen a little bit more? Would he practice his leadership differently? And that was the moment where the Undercover Millennial program was born. And that was almost 5 years ago. And since that time, I've worked with over 181 organizations, and Undercover, I have interviewed over 10,000 employees as the Undercover Millennial. And it works almost the same way it did the first day it started. I go into an organization as a millennial, someone off the street, and I'm not a manager. I'm not a part of the organization. I'm just another millennial or a young person who's looking for a job. And I walk up to the first person that I see and I just say, hey, I'm just thinking about applying. What's it like to work here? And then they tell me everything. Everything. I mean, the good, the bad, what's working and what's not working. And the power of that is, I mean, you can tell already I'm anti like survey, right? Like fill out the survey and let us know how we're doing better. Fill out the survey to know how we can make work better for you. Most employees don't answer honestly on those surveys because they're always worried what's on the other side of the survey. Like, so I'm just going to leave. Yeah, we're doing great. Maybe a little more, maybe some free lunch, or maybe a little more flexibility with. Like they don't get specific because they're worried, right? Even though you say it's anonymous, and it might be anonymous, but what I've created and what I feel like we've been able to do over these 5 years is create the most real and authentic data on how great leaders were creating organizations their people never wanted to leave. And we've done it in the most authentic and real way that I think has ever been approached, because it's not a survey. It's not a fill in the blank. It's been time. It's been a lot of work, but we've been able to look at consistent trends within specific work industries that are working, that are keeping people here, that are building loyal workforces and organizations that people go, I like myself best because I'm here. And I quickly changed, the mentality of the program to not a problems-based program. I didn't want to find the problems in the organization. The magic to me was when I would go up to them and say, hey, what's it like to work here? And they would respond with, I love it here. I love my job. My manager, Susie, you got to meet Susie. Susie, come here, meet this guy. Like, I'll never leave. I love what we're doing. I love our culture, our purpose, my teammates, like they're my family, like those types of responses. And when that was trending in an organization, oh man, it was magical. It was powerful. And that's why the new book that's coming out in April, all of the research, we put it in the book, and it's called I Love It Here, How Great Leaders Create Organizations Their People Never Want to Leave. And it's really been a fun thing to be a part of and to voice their opinion, right? To give the employees a voice. The book is not another leadership book written by a self-proclaimed leadership expert or someone who's led lots of people. I didn't want to write that. Those books are out there. That's been done. I wanted to write a book from the employee's perspective when their leaders were getting it right. And that's what we've been able to do.
I can't wait to see the book, because you've got the data. I mean, it's like you've been asking questions, and one of the things I can tell about you is that you just ask better questions than most people, right? You have this knack for that. It may be something somebody taught you on the way, but you jump in and you just say, hey, what's this question? What's the answer to this question? There were so many things I thought of during all that stuff, which is I'm having I'm stuttering. This is part of being live. I don't even know what to say. But one of the questions is like, what is you're sitting in a boardroom. I don't know. Do you put together an analysis for this or whatever? However, you let the CEO or the leader of this owner of this company know that they pretty much suck, right? I mean, what is the look on some of the faces you've seen when you're like, 5 out of 6 of your employees hate working here and they're going to be gone in the next 3 months. So, I mean, what kind of responses have you seen there?
Yeah, so it depends. And every company's different. If they're a smaller organization, so let me start with bigger organizations, actually. So if they're a bigger organization, a lot of the times I have an undercover camera. I have one that's a little lapel camera or another one that's actually on a pen, shoots in 1080p. And we use that to tell the story of what's really happening. Because it's one thing to like go and present to management or go to present to the executives and say, look, this is what I found. But it's another thing to show them what I found. And privacy and employee identity is the #1 priority to everything that we do. And so when we work with an organization, and I do go in undercover, we make sure that all the video, that their faces are blurred out, their voices are changed if needed. If it's a smaller organization or there's a chance that an employee can be identified, we don't film at all. Because the goal is not to figure out who needs to be fired. And the goal is not to figure out who needs to be promoted. The goal is to find the truth. Let's find what's working. Let's find what's not working through their eyes. And then let's create a plan. Let's find the universal principles to meet the need. How do we find a solution? And I like to focus on the solutions, not the problems. I think that's another thing is if there's something that's working, let's accentuate that. Let's figure out how to make that better. And so that's the approach that we take.
Right. And so what kind of movement are you seeing in, because we can talk about turnover. And I actually did my original podcast. You don't even know this. It's called the Restaurant General Manager Podcast. Because I was, before I was furloughed, I'd been working on it about a year on this restaurant GM coach type thing. And I interviewed Bruce Tracy, who's professor at Cornell University, co-authored a study on the cost of turnover in hospitality. And with inflation, because he did that in 2005 and 6, and when I interviewed him in 2019, early 2020, the inflation cost is about $7,400 per employee, the cost of turnover. Now, for someone like a GM like me, and you're paying for relocation programs, it could be upwards of like $20,000, $30,000. And someone who may be a 16, 17-year-old host, it may be, $1,000 or something like that. But the average is $7,400, and 52% of that is like them making mistakes, right? The mistakes and people not carrying it on their way out, and the new employee making mistakes on the way in.
Yeah.
Right? And so all of this stuff is super controllable. So, I mean, you look at, you're spending almost $4,000 or $3,600 in mistakes, right? In the training program and those type of things. So what kind of numbers are you seeing on the retention side? Because companies can put that money directly to the bottom line if they're not having to go through this process of firing or people quitting and leaving and then having to spend the time to hire and train new employees.
Yeah, and I think it's a sometimes I've seen employers and executives and organizations, they look at it as a paper cut, right? They go, it's just the industry. We're expected to have turnover. Nobody grows up to be a Subway sandwich artist per se, right? Like it's just a job that people are, it's a little part-time thing that they do through school. But what I always tell people is why would you, when you could have an employee for, 3 months versus 3 years, right? And that happens in any type of role. I don't care if it's McDonald's, Subway, anything that might have a high attrition or high turnover, or these industries that just view it as a paper cut, easy come, easy go. It's just a part of the business. But what you gain in not just the financials, right? We talk about, and we found that it's about an average of 15 grand an employee is in what you lose in productivity on the financial spectrum. So that's the tangible side. But now let's focus on the intangibles, like what you lose in morale, what you lose in fear of other people or people talking, right? When everybody leaves or if they're dissatisfied, like that is a toxic thing in an organization that spreads fast. And it's sometimes easy to focus on those tangible. What's the financial? What do we lose? What do we gain? But there's sometimes the intangibles that you never see that ultimately affect productivity, that affect morale, that affect purpose, that affect culture in an organization that we all know is critical.
It's super important. And I think Peter Drucker said that culture will eat strategy for lunch.
Yep.
Right. And so, if you're starting to, and I've done this, and I've, made the mistakes over the years, but, or, like surgically from time to time, like I start a new job and I go in and I have to see who fits the restaurant, or who's, people break rules, right? Some people are not good employees, right? They're
Yep.
not following the thing. They make mistakes. They don't show up on time, and you give them as many chances as you can to go through the company's, progressive discipline process. And it's sometimes you have to let people go, right? Or people say the wrong
Absolutely.
thing to people. I had somebody that, kissed a girl that didn't want to be kissed, right? So
Yep.
you've got to take action on that, right? No matter how long he's worked there, how good of an employee he's been up to that point, he made a mistake, and he's done that, right? And it sends a shockwave through the entire, ecosystem when somebody's been let go. And the general consensus behind the scenes is that that person shouldn't have been let go, and the GM, or the person who made the decision, which is in bigger companies, HR makes the bigger decisions, is not the general manager of the restaurant and things
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
But because you're the face and you have to actually physically do it, you get blamed. You get the credit for it, right? Good or bad, right?
Yeah.
With those things.
Yeah, and that's the thing that, you bring up a great point, Scott, because there's still the standards,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's still a level of respect. There's still expectations. There's still the duties of the job. There's still things like sexual harassment issues, abuse, not showing up for the job, right? Like, those are problems that are gonna, you're gonna have to let people go, right? Or you're gonna have those tough conversations.
Right.
We found in our research that there were two variables. Anytime when an employee was satisfied or they were dissatisfied with their job, I could bring it down to two things: the standards of the organization and the connection, or the lack thereof. Those are the two things. And leadership always is the number one reason why people stay, and it's the number one reason why people go. Leadership always. And so the ability to, either a leader is too high on their standards, right? They're the old school. Sometimes we think this command and control, like put your head down, go to work. I'm not here to, show you that I love you and compliment you every day. Like, I give you a paycheck, okay? Smile and be happy. There's those types of leaders, right? Where they're high on standards, but they're low on connection. Or you have the leader that just wants to be everybody's friend, where they're high on connection, but they're low on standards.
Mm-hmm.
They're the leader that's like, hey, it's okay that you were late. It's fine. I know it's happened 17 times this week, but it's fine. I want to be your friend. Let's play Xbox on the weekends.
Right.
What that does is creates a sense of entitlement. So we get from the controlling manager this sense of rebellion, and then from the buddy manager we get this sense of entitlement. And then there's the removed managers, right? Removed leaders. These are leaders that should have got out of the business 20 years ago, where they're low on standards and they're low on connection. And so this creates just complete disengagement with their employees altogether.
Wow.
But the fourth manager, and this was the magic, Scott, that we found, we call them the mentor manager. They were equally high on their standards, their expectations, but they were also as equally high on their level of connection. They understood that they needed to develop people. There was a job that needed to be done, but then they also understood that there was a person to be understood, a person to be heard, a person to be seen. Connection. And we found that no significant loyalty ever happened without significant connection. And that's what employees talked about. Like, they didn't talk about days. When they were so satisfied with their job and where they loved it here and they felt like they were doing something bigger than themselves. And I asked them why. What is it that their leader did? They talked about moments. Moments. It can kind of seem broad, but I believe that the better leaders are at creating moments, single moments in time that impact people's lives, the more influential they become in their leadership. And there's a reason why we called them the mentor. Mentorship is a unique thing because it's not necessarily leadership, it's not management, it's mentorship.
Right.
And it was a powerful combination when a leader became a mentor. If you look at any great, film or any great play or a movie, you always have the hero of the story, and they're going through a difficult time, right? You've got Aladdin, Frodo, Harry Potter, Luke Skywalker.
Yep.
who shows up, who always shows up in every great story? It's the mentor.
It's a mentor. It's the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell's the hero of 1,000 faces, right?
Totally. And
Yeah.
and the cool thing is that mentorship, it must be earned, right?
Mhm.
Like you might have the title as a manager, a supervisor, a GM, but your people will decide if you're the mentor.
Right.
And there was 5 characteristics that qualified a mentor to become a mentor. And it was really interesting because just the engagement that they yielded because of these 5 characteristics, the loyalty, the respect that they gained, it was powerful. And people said, I don't have a boss, I have a mentor.
Mm.
And that relationship of true advocacy, and I call it advocacy because the mentor is the person that connects them to their dream, whether it was to grow in the company, whether it was to make more money, maybe it was to spend more time with their kids.
Mm.
The mentor connected them to their dreams. And I think within our leadership, and I found it in the research that we have done, when you become that person to your employees, the connection, what happens because of that is priceless. It's priceless.
It is. It totally is. I'd like to think that that towards the end of my career in the restaurant world that I was, on that level with at least some of the employees. Some people are not receptive to that, right? Because they're where they are and those type of things.
Yep.
And I know with some that I was able to connect on that level, and I've gotten messages, and and that's some of the most treasured messages that I've ever gotten, are like months after I leave a place, or they leave a place and they tell me, I see why you were doing this, and I really appreciate it, and I'm carrying that on in my career as I grow, or things like that. And so you're hitting the nail right on the head for me. It's just super powerful stuff, and I've worked with people side by side with people where, we hire fast, we fire fast, right?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
Another old saying is, break them down and build them back up,
Yeah.
right? Or constant gentle pressure, right, is another one. And I, that was a tactic that I used, right, which was it was a subconscious tactic. It was easy. Like if everybody knows that they make a mistake, they didn't even think this through until later, until I moved away from it. But what happens is that you can put pressure on your entire organization that they know if they make a mistake, they're going to get in trouble.
Yep.
So they're always walking on eggshells everywhere because they're worried about getting in trouble, versus you seeing the good in what they're doing and trying and really trying to recognize the positive. So I love the way that you accentuate the positive in organizations and those things. And so you're talking about mentorship, and I know that you, in your bio, you have this thing called the mentorship effect. So can you explain what happens you talked about what it is to be a mentor, but what is the effect and what happens inside this culture, the environment, the ecosystem of a company?
Yeah. Again, I think the powerful thing with the mentorship effect is that it is earned.
Mm.
You've earned it. You must qualify yourself as the leader to become that role. And that takes time. But when it happens, it's powerful. The 5 characteristics that we talked about that allow the mentorship effect to happen, I call it the 5 C's of mentorship. Anybody that has ever become a mentor, they had these 5 C's. These were the qualifying factors that allowed that type of loyalty, respect, and engagement from their people. Number 1 was confidence. A mindset. You were confident in your job, your ability to lead, what needed to be done. This is the direction we're going. These are the tasks that need to be accomplished. You're confident in how you talk to them, how you approach them. Confidence. It's a mindset that invokes trust. Number 2 is your credibility. What's your background? What's your resume? I mean, if you're working in the hospitality industry, well, did you come from a different industry? Or have you grown up in the hospitality industry? Your people need to know that. Mm-hmm. What's your background? Well, it helps to give them a reason to go, okay, you might know what you're talking about, versus you just thinking that you know what you're talking about.
Right.
And number three is competence, right? You might know everything about basketball. You might know the rules, but can you actually get out and shoot a hoop? Right? We talk about servant leadership, getting in the trenches, the ability to do something that you're asking others to do. Mm-hmm. It not only helps you to just teach, but it also helps to show some empathy, connection. Okay, cool. You want me to do this, but I know that you can actually do it too. It creates another specific level of trust. And then the third one is candor. Great mentors have the ability to be honest, right? They put the deposits of trust in the bank account, but it also allows them to withdraw when they need to, when they need to take out, when I need to have an honest conversation. I put in those deposits of connection, the deposits of time, letting you know that I am your advocate, but I also have created a relationship where truth can exist. And that's powerful, because ultimately I feel like most people want to grow. Most people are looking to, I don't know. There are a few, right? We can't ever stereotype or put someone in a box, but most people, the mundane routine, do the same thing day in and day out. That doesn't last. And I'm all about the long game, right? You might be the controlling manager. You might invoke fear. You might put pressure, and that does get results. It does. I've seen it time and time again, but the results do not last. Right. And you might get short-term gains, but I'm about the long-term game. How do we get a 3-month employee to turn into a 3-year employee or a 30-year employee, right? To me, that is significance in the workplace, not just success. I want to create significance. How do we create purpose, meaning, an ability for people to thrive in their job, not just survive? And again, honest conversation. So candor, that's number 4. And then the number 5 is just the ability to care, to really just care. So that's the 5 C's. That if you become a true mentor in someone's life, you possess those 5 characteristics, and they see those 5 characteristics in you. And once you have that and you've established that, then the mentorship effect really takes place in creating moments. Single moments in time that change people's lives, where you advocate, you connect people to their dreams. When I was a little kid, Scott, I struggled to sit still. I had a hard time focusing. Like my right hand would go, my left hand would go. I just fidgeted a lot. I got sent to the principal's office. I was called the tapper. I got nicknamed the twitcher in school. And I had an educator. His name was Mr. Jensen. And he told me to stay after class one day. And I'm thinking I'm going to get kicked out of school. And the bell rings. Class dismissed. It's a completely empty room, minus Mr. Jensen and me. And he walks up and he motions me to come to the back of the class. And he said, "Clint, listen, I know everybody teases you. I know everybody looks at you as the problem. You're the kid that can never sit still. You're the kid that's on the list." He said, "But I have to know something." He said, "Can you tap your head and rub your belly at the same time?" He's like, "I just got to know." He's like, I've watched you." He said, "You'll start moving your right hand, and then literally at the same time, you start moving your left hand." And he said, I think you're ambidextrous." And I was like, "No, I'm Presbyterian." He goes, "No, that's not what it means." He said, "No, try it." He said, "Tap your head and rub your belly." And I gave it a go, and I could do it. And he said, "Now, can you switch it?" And then I would rub my head and then tap my belly and tap my head and rub my belly. And I could do it, literally, without thinking about it. And Mr. Jensen, he leaned back in his chair, and he looked at me, and he created a moment. And he said, "Clint, I don't think you're a problem. I just think you're a drummer." And he reached back in his desk, and he opened up his top drawer, and he reached inside, and he took out my very first pair of drumsticks. My very first pair.
Right.
Scott, he became an advocate, not just a developer. And that was 22 years ago. And I'll never forget when he took the drumsticks and he put them in my hands, and he said, "Clint, these are for you." And he said, "I don't know what's going to happen, but just promise me that you'll keep them in your hands as much as you can." And I can stand here today and tell you honestly that I have tried for 22 years to keep my promise to Mr. Jensen. And for 22 years, I've had the opportunity to tour and record all over the world playing the drums. I've been on America's Got Talent. I played drums with Blue Man Group, Tim McGraw, Carrie Underwood. I remember when I graduated high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And so what do you do when you have no idea? You go to college, right?
Right.
I went to college. I graduated in 2012 with a bachelor's degree and zero college debt, zero debt
Right.
from music scholarships.
Mm.
And I'm not telling you this story to go, oh, wow, good for you, Clint, or look at all the accolades, or wow, that must have been awesome. No, the reason I'm telling you that is because of one person,
Right.
one significant leader who understood the power of connection, the
Right.
power of a moment. He did two things for me, and it's two things that we have seen in great leaders that have created organizations that people never want to leave. They have the amazing ability to communicate possibilities, potential in somebody,
Mm-hmm.
but then they also have the ability to communicate worth, recognition, growth opportunities. I'm going to help you grow. And then second, I'm going to recognize you for the good that you do. I'm going to make sure that you know that you are worth it, that you are seen for what you do. You are heard for what you say. Those two things, if you can communicate that to the point where that person, that employee sees that within themselves, you become iconic. You become influential. You become a mentor.
Mm.
And it is a powerful and a beautiful thing to see in leadership. It is about people. It is about changing lives. Yes, there are tasks to be done. Yes, there is development. But when you understand that your role as a leader is a significant role and how you help people live a better story, it changes everything.
Right. That's an amazing story. I mean, I got chills listening to you tell that, and I think one of the next pieces of the puzzle with that is that because somebody did that for you at one of the probably weakest times in your life, I would imagine you've been able to pay that forward by seeing that things in other people.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's, I think, why I'm so passionate about what I do. I think that's what it kept me going, and seeing what mattered to people, what mattered. I think sometimes through leadership we go, well, what matters to drive the bottom line?
Mm.
What matters to help us, like Simon Sinek, to keep playing the game?
Right.
Where I'm more as, and that's great and that's important. I know I don't want to knock that, but when we remember that we have lives and people that have lives and needs and worries and frustrations and hardships and successes and a
Right.
story to be told, and when you know that you have the pen in your hand as a leader to help them write a better one, I would hope for good leaders, good people that actually love to be in management, that they realize that they remember that. And when you do, I think you treat people differently.
Yeah. You do.
Yeah.
You absolutely do. Especially if I'm in the same boss that hired me that knew that I had some hidden discipline in me, Jeffrey. He said, he goes, your whole game is the long game,
Yeah.
right? And I have advice for people for this, but I wonder what your advice is for people because I love the infinite game because it really means so much to me, right? Because I look at my family as like, what can I do today to impact 4 generations,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I look at, and another example of that is Del Frisco's restaurant group
Hmm.
was going bankrupt and Landry's came in and bought it. The game of restaurants kept going, but a player fell out and another player assumed that position, right? And bought that particular restaurant.
Yep.
But if someone is, just early, or starting to adopt this mindset that you and I both have of like being the tortoise, not the hare, right? Building this thing for a long and creating trends and investing in people and they or happen to work for or get hired by an organization that's only after the short run, what advice do you have for them to be a leader inside of that organization um, when they're looking at the long run and their organization is the opposite culture, so to speak?
Yeah. I think it's hard. It's hard when you're in that management position where you've got executives at the top where they are, they want to grow the business, right? They want to maybe sell it. They want to acquire something. They want to scale. And I think, again, it's you can control what you can control. I think it's important to vocalize what you stand for as a leader, to vocalize what you want to accomplish as a leader, what you're trying to do, your style of leadership, and then you've got to adapt that with the needs of the upper management, upper leaders in the organization as well. But I think too many leaders lead by default, right? We don't lead by design. And I think one of the greatest things you can do is figure out, what do you want to be known for?
Mm.
It's crazy to me. Like, if I were to ask you, Scott, to name the last 3 NFL MVPs.
Yeah, I don't watch football, so
Yeah, we don't
you,
know.
right? Yeah.
Or who are the last 2 Academy Award winners for Best Actor?
Right. I don't know.
No clue. Who are the last 2 Miss Americas? Like, we don't know who those people are.
Right.
But watch this, Scott. Tell me the name of one of the teachers that you had in your life that made a difference for you. Do you remember their name?
Coach Hyman.
Think of somebody in your workspace or your last job who made a difference in your life.
Last job, Francesco.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we remember those people. Why? Because they took time to remember us. They were leaders. They were mentors. They were people that lived by design. They created moments.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you, they created moments that communicated your potential, your worth. They recognized you. They advocated for you. And in doing so, you became unforgettable. You don't forget the good ones. We don't forget the Mr. Jensens. And so stay true to that. Hold to that, because it's needed now more than ever.
Right. You got a couple minutes. I know you got a meeting right at 11. We've had several comments come in, just some people saying hi, but I want to just recognize these people really quick. So Subhash, he said, love only love, wild love, right? Sharon tune in. This is very beginning of the show. We have snow. It's beautiful. I don't know where Sharon is in the world, but she's on LinkedIn. One of my fellow co-creators from England, Saf, was watching the show on Facebook. And then Leave It to Leva, she said, thanks for telling your story, Clint.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, it's I get chills. We're connecting with people. We're doing this. We're doing the right thing. And because my whole mission when I started out with the restaurant GM coach was to do exactly what you're doing, and you're doing it on such a high level. It's absolutely amazing. I found out when I wasn't in a restaurant that I did still think about my health every single day. And that's where I birthed, in a COVID pivot moment, Modern Longevitarian. I've owned this domain name for 9 years. I never did anything with it until I was furloughed from my job with COVID. So I want to say thanks for the work you do. It's impressive, and I'm super excited to see your new book and how that impacts the world. So thank you.
You're very welcome, Scott. It's an honor. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much. And we got one more importer. Probst, you're the best, Clint.
Thank you, Porter. I appreciate that.
All right, you go jump on your next call. I'm going to wrap this up right now. Clint, thanks for coming on the show. I'm going to have you back at some point, and you'll be one of the very first repeat guests. This is episode 58, 0 repeat guests, 0 repeat. The theme is the thing, but super powerful message, and you're a super powerful person. And maybe one day, when we can actually get within 6 feet of each other, we're in Utah, we'll have to get together and have lunch or something.
Done. I'm in. You let me know, man.
I'm looking forward to it. Talk
All
to
right.
you later.
Appreciate you, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, Scott Stanfield here. And I just want to wrap up the show, episode 58, with Clint Pulver, the undercover millennial. And one of my first guests is actually standing up. And so that was super cool to have him in his element. He's a Emmy-Award winning keynote speaker, author. He also has the mentorship effect, all of those things. Tomorrow's show is normally Biohack Whack Wednesday. And, to be honest with you, I haven't quite figured out exactly what the show is going to be, but I want you to tune in, because it's so many things that I've done over the years that I've used myself as a human guinea pig. And it's going to, I'm so excited about where we are with the show and all the things that are coming up. Now, the Book of Secrets is coming out. We're going to be putting the finishing touches on that today. And so that'll be up for a free download. So I'm teasing that a little bit. And you know what? January is a season for resolutions. And most people in January, a lot of people now are stopping to drink alcohol and doing dry the whole month. And so, but I'm encouraging you, if you're looking for weight loss, I'm starting a group of people focused this month on getting a little trimmer, right? Because that's the first step in your health span, your lifespan, right? How many overweight old people do you see? Not many, right? People don't live to be 100 years old and are extremely overweight. Puts too much pressure on your body. Taxes it too much inflammation, which is the source of all of this stuff. Your waist to hip ratio is super important for your health span and your lifespan. So tune in tomorrow. We're probably going to be talking about something to deal with weight loss and really getting that going. And so sorry for being like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, but tomorrow's show is a Wednesday, Biohack Back Wednesday. I'm super excited about this show, where it's going to go with Clint and what his future is. And it's so many things. He's such a powerful individual. And so anyway, I'm going to wrap this up right here. It's time to roll credits. If it's your Friday, I hope you have a great week. Cheers.